Okay, seeing none, let's move on to our next one, band parents, band uniforms.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Before we start, I just want to say thank you for allowing us to have this time, and thank you for your continued support of the music program at RB. I'm going to grab a quick.
Could you just introduce yourselves for the viewing audience at home?
Sure. I'm James Baum. I'm the band director, orchestra director, jazz band director, and general music teacher here at RB.
I'm Olga Androulis. I'm co-chair of the music sponsors.
And it's the new band, yeah. Okay. So, just a little history. This is our old uniform from 1987. This is 2 uniforms prior to our current uniform. So, yeah, there are current students, mothers, and aunts in that picture. This is the direct predecessor to our uniform. It came complete with a cowboy hat. And this is our current uniform, as modeled by me my freshman year in high school. Yeah. So our current uniforms were bought in 1995, and they are a poly wool blend. I have one right here, if you want to see it. They are, the pants are somewhat of an old style pant, featuring these lovely straps that X behind the back and are always confusing for our kids to put on. They have, it was somewhat of a state-of-the-art design at the time. There's zippers right here to accommodate students of different waist sizes. However, the zippers over time broke, and so now most kids have 2 safety pins right here to keep those together. And yeah, so that's that. The top had a removable collar, which I don't think we've ever removed them or replaced them, but you could, because they're a little bit yellow. This one's currently safety pinned together as well, and that's pretty normal for our current state of affairs, as you can see right here. A lot of them have zippers that are an issue. Most of them have this sort of fraying going on somewhere on the uniform where it's gotten caught. A lot of them have tears on the cuffs. This one, most of them it's sort of a faded blue, and then the cuffs here are getting really frayed at the bottom. So that's where we're currently at. Some of the worst ones, the straps have broken. This is that safety pinned zipper idea. And then all of the white on them is really not as brilliant as what it used to be. So here is our proposed new uniform. This is our This is drum major Ben Longo. You can do it. He wants to do this.
Like it.
Yeah. This uniform is built by Zemullin and Brothers and Company, which is the same company that built this current uniform, which is why I sort of stuck with them. I also stuck with them because they're highly recommended by most of the districts that are around, and they're great to work with. To get to this final design, we went through 14 or 15 different renditions and artist renderings, and finally settled in on this design, which is really, really nice. There are other companies out there. Bandman's is one source. That another conference school does use that company. However, most everyone I've talked to likes Zemullin, and that's why I went with that company. The features on it, if you want to come a little bit closer, we're going to use him to model. First of all, most most modern band uniforms are coming with this sort of idea where like there's a shoulder flap, as well as a slimmer waistline, which is that as this one has. And most of them are also having like a little bit of asymmetry going with them. So we kept sort of the idea of this line here where it's on two, and then we put it to just one side to give it a little more modern flair. Kept the epaulets but went to a black, and then I tried to avoid white as much as possible so we can avoid sort of fading. And if you want to take off the coat.
Easy, we didn't buy that yet.
That's right. These are the new style pants. In addition, a difference in this style pant, the current pants that we have go up to about the waist and then have those funky sides. They did away with the sides, and so now the only thing that's sized on these pants is the waist size. These pants will fit somebody who is 6'5" as well as 4'8". And you can see we've sort of set up his one pant leg so that it fits him, and then the other pant leg on the outside has two snaps right here, and you roll them up and you just snap them in place. So they'll fit everyone as long as it fits their waist size. So we'll have to get different varying waist sizes that will work with that. And then it has the straps to adjust the in-seat. So it's a pretty ingenious idea.
Are you concerned about the waist size thing? I'm just thinking just like with tuxedo rentals, I mean, that's usually why they put those things on the side so that you get you get like 30 to 34 or 40 to
Right.
44, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a concern, but if we get the proper amount of uniforms, we should be able to fit everyone. And you get, it's a bell curve, so you get the most of the kids in the middle, and we can make it fit that way. I don't believe our tuxes right now have that adjustability to them, and we're able to make them fit. So, this is the breakdown of the cost. The coat is $208. The pants are $88. The shako or the hat is $50. The plume $15, and for a total of $360. And to fit a band our size, we need to get 150 uniforms just to make sure that we have enough sizes for every student to have a proper fitted uniform.
We're averaging how many students per year?
Over the last 6 or 7 years, between 100 and 120. Right now we're at 116. It looks like the numbers might be going up. The Hauser program is really exploding, so we'll see if that comes over here. So how are other districts purchasing things? Some other districts have their booster clubs just pay for everything. And typically these schools are much larger, with much larger bands, talking about 200 to 220 in the band for high school. Their budgets for the board, coming from the Board of Education, are much larger. They are able to purchase things like, they're able to employ 5 or 6 assistant band directors in order to run something that large. Their booster organizations are much larger. For instance, Lincoln Way East here, I was just there on Saturday. Lincoln Way East, their boosters run 15 fundraisers a year. 5 of them are ongoing throughout the year, like Market Day and Scripps. Their ending balance at the end of the year, they're hoping for $25,000 in the bank, whereas our booster club is hoping for at least $1,000 in the bank, so that way we can do pizza parties and such. Lincoln Way East has an entire semi-truck for their band, supplied by the boosters. So
Are they a competitive band, James?
they are a competitive band. Yeah.
We're not a competitive band, right?
We are not, no. Some other districts don't have marching band uniforms. They just march in t-shirts that are matching. So typically these schools are schools without a budget whatsoever, without a booster program whatsoever. And it's all on the band director to make this sort of thing happen. Typically the students pay for the shirts and then they get to keep the shirts in the end. Niles North High School is a band that's like that. In 1993, Niles North Band was dissolved due to budget cuts. Last 2 years ago, they brought it back, and this is what they're dealing with right now. The band's growing, and they hope to get uniforms eventually. So that's how they've started their band program again, which you got to give them kudos for bringing it back after it's been cut, because a lot of places won't even do that. So that's great. And then there's other districts where the bill is all on the district. Why would they pay for their band uniforms? Well, the uniforms are district property. First of all, the kids don't get to take them home after they're done using them. They stay at the school. It's also not fair to ask your current student body to fundraise for uniforms that will be used over 10 years and having them doing all the legwork to provide these new uniforms. And then on top of that, the band is probably the most, or one of the most visible aspects of a high school out in the community and out in the community at large. And most districts want that to be a very positive force out in the community. Our conference schools that have supplied bands with uniforms, Glenbard South, 9 years ago, they began to fundraise, and then the district stepped in and said, no, that's ridiculous, we're gonna take care of this. Fenton, the district buys band uniforms as well. Elmwood Park is hoping, well, they're looking to see what happens here, because they're in the same boat as we are. Out of conference schools that have supplied uniforms, Addison, Willowbrook, you can read all of those. So lots of schools are doing it that route as well. And these are typically schools that are non-competition school, non-competition bands, smaller booster programs, and the like. So that's our new uniform and the ideas behind it. The second proposal that I have tonight, well, a little bit more about our program. The budget supplied by the Board of Education, these are just two numbers that you might look at. Supplies are $4,800. That supplies music and instruments and anything else that we might need to run the program, but not just for the marching band, but also for the orchestras, the jazz. I use a little bit of that for my general music stuff, and then all three bands and the marching band. So it's a lot of people taken from that. Our repairs go to repairing the instruments, $7,200, and typically we use pretty much all of that in any given year. We also, a couple years ago, started a uniform activity account. We kicked off with a fundraiser at Noodles and Company, and we raised $400 one night. It's just typical, like the Culver's nights that the other clubs have done. And then, in addition, I added the ticket sales for Arby's Got Talent from this year into that. So right now that balance is at $1,246. Our current enrollment in marching band is 116. Performances in uniform, currently we do all home games, and then we do the Von Steuben Day downtown. So this year that was 6 performances. In years past that's been 6 or 7, up to 8, depending on whether or not the football team makes the playoffs and so forth. In the past, we've also done a few more parades. We've done the Columbus Day Parade, we've done the Pet Parade, and then we also used to do marching band festivals. So the uniforms got worn a little bit more in the past. When the newer budgets came out, our transportation fee was reduced, so we're not able to go out as much. To take the band on the Von Steuben Day Parade, we use up our transportation fee for the whole year. So we're not able to take the kids out like we were used to. So that's a little bit about what we do in uniform.
Do these downtown parades pay us?
They pay some, yes. But generally not enough to cover 3 buses or whatever it is that we need that year. Yeah. And then proposal 2 is a fee adjustment. And to be honest, I'm not sure how I stand on this. When I proposed it the first time, I was all for it, and now talking to people, I don't know. I probably need to vet this out a little bit. But the current marching band fee is $25. $10 of that goes to cleaning their tuxes and skirts for concert season, and then $15 goes to dry cleaning the marching band uniforms. So I propose that we increase the fee to $50, with $25 still going to dry cleaning, but then the other $25 can be rolled into our activity account for uniforms and accumulated over 10 years or whatever the life of our new uniform is, which should be 12 years at the very least. And over, let's say, 10 years conservatively, that would raise us about $25,000, which we could then bankroll into the next uniforms. So that's the idea. My concerns, I don't know any other district that's doing this, so I don't know how it would affect our enrollment. I don't know how parents would feel about paying the extra money, and I don't know if that would reduce our enrollment then. So that's my proposal.
Thorough presentation, James.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Olga, do you have anything to add, or?
I think Mr. Vaughn has covered everything. Just one thing I do want to point out, that the uniforms, I don't know if we want to pass them around to any of the board members, but what used to be white is no longer white. There was one photograph that we had, and you can only clean it to a certain degree.
Right. 18 years, it's time.
It's older than all the kids in this room, just about. So it's time. The question is, where does the money come from? As Mr. Baum pointed out, our music sponsors organization is actually a subcommittee of the PTO, of Patrons Council. So we're not a sizable group, although we do run all the fundraisers for the kids' trips, and that's alternating every year, so there's only so much we could do. What we'd really hate to see is a drop in enrollment in any of the music programs, because that is so important. That's
I
it.
know there was one board member question.
I have a couple questions. Some I gave to Kevin in advance. So the set of uniforms before this we kept for 7 years, and these we kept for 18. What's the normal life considered on the uniforms? Do you know?
The normal uniform is 10 to 12 years.
Okay.
And if our usage continues the way it is, we should be able to hit the 12-year mark, no problem.
And if we have an average of 100 to 120, is it typical that you need to buy 25% more uniforms than you
Yeah,
have members?
that's what our that's what the rep.
Because of the sizes?
Because of the sizes, to make sure they fit.
Okay, the last one you're not going to like, but every time marching band is presented to us, when we had long discussions on waivers, and you did it yourself, you almost presented as a sport. Marching band's waived out of gym, even though the athletes aren't, during the whole semester, and you're doing a comparison that schools buy it like their other sports. So you said you were concerned about the $50. I'd like to know why you don't think we should just charge the $200 pay to participate like we do for the sports, because that would clearly have a justification to cover the uniform cost, and it would put you on par with the other athletes as you have come to us and said, give us a waiver because marching band's more like a sport and kids shouldn't go to gym when they're a marching band.
I wouldn't compare it to a sport first because it's a curricular class, which is why they aren't paying the $200, because it's not it's a co-curricular class. We have activities that are outside of the school day, but the class component of it is the driving force behind any of the ensembles here, which is why we don't have a fee for it.
Any other questions?
I have a question mainly for us. I mean, I think it's reasonable when the young people get their uniform to look at the uniform like we do books, and then when they return it, if there's damage or anything, to charge some kind of fee for that. Where do we put these kind of capital expenses in our budget? It is capital, it's equipment that belongs to the school. It's like our lab equipment.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it under
It's
capital
not
necessarily,
over
because it's not
$1,000.
$1,000 per uniform.
No, but all together, it's like our lab equipment, it's like our chairs, it's like our library books. It's stuff that we use in the school.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about where we would put it in the budget, in that we didn't plan for this, obviously, this year. So if this is something that we're gonna front money for, or use a fee structure to help offset over the next several years,
That's
we'll have
not
to
really-
budget for that.
That's not really the question. My question, not exactly what line item it was, but we've been talking about what is our plan when we need new computers. The questions come up. How do we think about having money in our budget so that we are buying things that we need to do the business of education? Whether it's microscopes, whether it's books, whether it's the things that we put in our classroom, whether it's new charts. Those things are a little more than the supplies, like the band uniforms, that's just part of doing school.
Right.
But we have stripped all these budgets to get the budget in line. And we've been talking about, kind of thinking about, how do we get those monies back into that budget so that we can replace these things in a timely way?
So as I stated, there's not a specific capital because it has to be $1,000 per item. So what we have done is for each of these different departments, they have supply budgets. So science has a supply budget where they replace microscopes and equipment on a needed basis. In technology, we have an age and obsolescence cycle, so we track it. So if we were going to budget money to front for band uniforms, we would then do an age and obsolescence cycle with the band director to make sure he's checking the uniforms and the life expectancy of the uniforms. Doing what you recommended, that if someone damaged a uniform, same way they would damage a textbook, we would use a fee. So that procedure can easily follow suit with some of our other departments. So I'm not too worried about that, and I think we could propose that once we would put this into the budget, if this is what the board, the majority of the board tells me to do, we can tell you how we're gonna track it and monitor it. But most of that happens, to answer your question, is through the supply budget.
Do we have other areas in the school that would benefit for an age and obsolescence kind of watchfulness, so that we're not surprised by the $54,000, well, we really need this, we've had it for 18 years. Are there other things, either in the shop, the auto shop, or in the culinary?
Well, I think there's been some changeover in the leadership and the department chair over the last few years, but every year the department chairs or the administrator who's directly responsible for those areas, we do budget meetings with the principal and the CFO, Tim, and they start laying out plans of, like, I think I can go another year with these textbooks, but we're gonna need new textbooks within the next 2 years, and it's averaging about 20,000, and they start doing those types of cycles. So that is something that we're doing and that we have kind of set up since the last 2 or 3 years.
Kevin, is it do you mind if I ask you, is your intent that you'd like to have a new set before the next fall's marching band? Is that the next thing people would wear?
Yeah.
Because that didn't come out, so.
Thanks, James. I didn't know you were Kevin.
By March 1st.
James had on there, me and James did talk. Worst case scenario, he thought he could get through one more fall.
Okay.
Because I did tell him that the way our budget cycle works, we can't spend $54,000 or front $54,000 on something we didn't plan for, unless obviously the board tells me to. So he thought he could piece it together for one more fall, but that would really be pushing it. And if we did do that, then we would know that we'd have to have a plan to purchase these as soon as possible.
The other question is for you. Doesn't this have to be bid out because it's over $25,000? So even though he went to the effort of, in essence, picking his preferred vendor, wouldn't we have to bid the
I would need to
proposal?
check on legal counsel. I think you're definitely right. Anything over 25,000 has to be bid out, but there are some exemptions to
Yeah,
that rule.
I don't know what the exemptions
And I don't know
are.
if the exemptions would apply to band uniforms or not.
Okay. If
So I
it
would
did
just
have to, there's a possibility, assuming we go down this route, you might have to consider more than one vendor under the state
My
law.
New England reps mentioned that some schools do that,
Okay.
and others don't. So I don't know in terms of legality what there is,
Okay.
but it's a possibility.
So Jim, let me ask you a question right now. When they as you're going through this process, have you talked to other suppliers, even though most people use that to see what they would come in at a bid on this would be?
No, I haven't talked with other suppliers about it, so I can't. If you like.
We can work with James and the music boosters in regards to the bidding process or working with vendors to get the best price. The biggest question I think that the board needs to consider is, I think Mr. Walsh brings up a good point. All of our sports pay 200, 100, or 150, 100. There's a sliding scale. All of our activities and all of our performance-based activities are all paying 75. So we should decide if there needs to be a fee or discuss this again at another meeting.
But the music is not an activity, it's not a sport. It's a class that meets every day. You get credit towards graduation. You take tests. You can actually fail it. It's not a sport, it's not an activity.
So do you need the uniform in
Yeah.
class?
You need a uniform
You
to pass
do.
the class?
You
Not in
actually-
class.
You-
It's part of my grade.
It's part of the grade, you have to be on, you have to march during the football field and you have to wear your uniform. It's part of the equipment of the class.
You know, I'd like a little more structure on this discussion. I mean, I appreciate this presentation, but, you know, I want the principals thing, and I want to discuss this as a board. Are we just going to have a free-for-all? So
No, he
I'm a
just
little
brought up his
confused.
proposal. Now we're
Well,
gonna discuss
it's
it.
his, well,
I don't think
What-
we're making a decision
No, we're not
tonight.
making a
We're
decision
absolutely
tonight.
not.
so,
He just brought up his proposal, the board will come back
If
and
there's
look at
some
it.
things you'd like to see and hear in the future, now's the time to throw those out. Laura has put out the things that she'd like to see and hear in the future or currently, you know.
Tim
Well,
has
I mean,
put out his idea.
I would like a little bit more on, you know, why this is differentiated between an activity, a sport, and, you know, a class. You know, what is the bid process, if there is any? I mean, that won't be answered tonight. I'd like to know if, like, the kids actually are assigned a specific uniform and they take them home every night and then return them at the end of the season like some of the other activities or sports do. I don't think they do. I think they go out on a band performance thing and then they come back and they hang them up on a rack. So, you know, where do we assign the damage? Are we inspecting the uniforms after every football game to then assign a particular fee? I mean, there's a lot of things that interchange into this decision and questions like that I would have, that I'd like to see before moving forward on a decision to say, you know, let's go buy these uniforms. Certainly, whether we need to bid them or not is not gonna be answered tonight, and if you have any other ideas that you need to get out, you can, you know, inject them tonight or
Well, I'd
send
make a
information forward that you'd like to have addressed.
well, I guess the question is, who's taking the notes? Kevin or Pam, or?
Kevin.
Because there's tons of.
Mary Ann, hopefully.
Mary Ann?
And it's recorded, You
No,
can go
I
back-
know,
you can
I'm
go
saying
back
that,
and
but
look.
it's just sort of weird because Jim's given the presentation, and I appreciate that, but it's beyond that.
Well, the first thing is that this was just a letter submitted by the music sponsors and Mr. Baum. They came to meet with me. I said, this is a board decision. So the first step in that whole process was them submitting a letter and asking for more time than the usual citizen comments to address the board and present their concern. That's happened tonight. I got two things written down here. Do we have to bid the uniform, and fee with a question mark?
Can I make a suggestion based on, I think what we should do, what I would suggest we do is have the administration come back to, I mean, clearly the uniforms need to be replaced if we're gonna have them. They're falling apart. Nobody's disagreeing with that. We got an issue whether we could, even if we wanted to, whether we could buy them this year in our budget. So, and we also got an issue of whether we have to bid it out and whether somebody is approving this particular style. And it looks nice to me, I'm not faulting it, but Pam and Kevin have to come to us and say, this is the one we think is okay, right? That's what they do for us. So I suggest you go back, you and Pam come to us and say, we think they should be replaced. This is the one we think we should do. We have to bid or not bid. The lead time on bidding is 2 months, 6 months, 8 months. If we want to replace them for next year's, we'd have to order them by X date. Do we have enough money in the budget to do that? And tied to that is, if we're going to do this in any case, should we consider what they recommend a possible change in the fee structure, but what do you recommend is the appropriate fee for this course? Should the cost of replacing these now and in the future be considered as part of the course fee? And we could just put it on clearly, I'm gonna guess the lead time can't be more than 3 or 6 months or something, right?
March 1st is when we would have to order them for next year.
Okay, so we have
We have some time.
2 or 3 months worth of meetings where we could have them propose, give us more details. Is
All right,
that
so
what you're
James, what they're
suggesting,
saying is
John?
we're gonna do some more research,
great.
the administration will do some more research, we'll come back. We'll also keep an eye on it and let you know when we're gonna be putting up as a board agenda item for discussion.
I will put it on the next agenda as new business, and then whether we have the information for December or we first bring it back in January,
I'd bring it back in January.
there'll be time.
And thank you for bringing, whenever you ask this board for money, it's always a very scary thing, just be persistent.
All right, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Ben,
John,
let's hear it for a model.
Wait, I gotta ask John, are you done, or are you all right?